Hello students, I hope you are all fine and in good health. I already started revising the chapter Landscape of the Soul. As you know by this time, it is a very important chapter, a very crucial chapter also for your post midterm examination. And in my previous audio presentation, I discussed up to material appearance. Now let me proceed and let me explain once again the next paragraph after that. See, it is written classical Chinese landscape. Actually, a classical Chinese landscape means a classical Chinese landscape painting, just like in the 8th century Wu Daozi had painted. A classical Chinese landscape is not meant to reproduce an actual view, as would a Western figurative painting. Now there lies a great deal of contrast, or rather to say, there lies a great difference between a classical Chinese painting and a Western or a European painting. Whereas the European painter wants you to borrow his eyes and look at a particular landscape exactly as he saw it from a specific angle, the Chinese painter does not choose a single viewpoint. As I repeated earlier also when I had discussed this particular chapter, that there is a great deal of difference in ideology, in thought perception between a Chinese painter and a European painter. In case of a European painter will ask you to follow him while you are eager to appreciate his painting. A European painter will want you to borrow his eyes, and obviously you have to look at a particular landscape European painting the way he wants you to see it from a specific angle. But having said that, the Chinese painter, on the other hand, he does not choose a single viewpoint like the European painter. His thought process, his ideology, his artistic perception is different from that of a European painter. So see, it is written, whereas the European painter wants you to borrow his eyes and look at a particular landscape exactly as he saw it from a specific angle, the Chinese painter does not choose a single viewpoint. The Chinese painter, unlike the European painter, does not choose a single viewpoint. His landscape is not a real one. There lies the spiritual essence of a Chinese painting, unlike a European painting. So his painted landscape is not a quote-unquote real one, and you can enter it from any point. This is a very important line, dear students. Unlike in case of a European painter's painting, you have to select a particular viewpoint as instructed by the painter. As instructed by which painter? As instructed by the European painter. But in case of a Chinese painting, the Chinese painter won't suggest you any particular viewpoint or any specific viewpoint. You can appreciate the painting from whichever way you want it. And you can enter it from any point means you can appreciate the painting, you can look through the painting, you can judge the painting, you can see the painting from whichever specific angle you prefer. There is no such suggested or restricted guidelines as we can find in case of a European painter. So I repeat, his landscape is not a real one, and you can enter it from any point, then travel in it. Not only you will enter, you have to travel in it. Now travel in it means you have to make out, or rather to say, you have to understand wholeheartedly the true essence of a Chinese painter's painting. There lies the essence of the meaning of the term travel in it. The artist creates a path for your eyes to travel up and down. The Chinese artist actually, he creates a way. Path means a way out for your eyes to travel up and down. Then back again in a leisurely movement. And since there is no specific point of view, so it depends on you to appreciate the painting from your side. That means it is a journey or an exercise that is both physical as well as mental. In case of a viewer, if a viewer wants to appreciate a Chinese painting. This is even more true in the case of the horizontal scroll, in which the action of slowly opening one section of the painting, then rolling it up to move on to the other, adds a dimension of time which is unknown in any other form of painting. Now the horizontal scroll, in which the action slowly opens one section of the painting, then rolls it up to the other. Now finally it adds a new dimension which is completely unknown in any other form of painting, but it is only visible or it is only known in case of the Chinese painting. It also requires the active participation of the viewer. I already suggested it to you, dear students, that it also requires the active participation or work of the viewer. That is the reason if someone is eager to appreciate a Chinese painting, there would be an exercise both on the physical and on the mental level of a viewer. It is an exercise that you have to go through if you want to appreciate a Chinese painting. So I repeat this line once again, dear students. It also requires the active participation of the viewer, who decides at what pace, pace means at what speed, he will travel through the painting, whether he will appreciate it from a horizontal scrolling point of view or he will move towards the painting or follow a definite path. It is up to him. There is no such jurisdiction from the point of view of the Chinese painter that you have to appreciate the painting from this specific point. You can't move this side. There is no such rule or regulations in case of a Chinese painting, and neither the Chinese painter will suggest you that. It entirely depends on you. So it is a mental as well as a spiritual exercise on the part of a viewer. So I repeat, it also requires the active participation of the viewer, who decides at what pace he will travel through the painting. A participation which is physical as well as mental. I already told you, dear students, so the participation ultimately is physical as well as the participation is mental. The Chinese painter does not want you to borrow his eyes. He wants you to enter his mind. Very important line, dear students. Please underline it. The Chinese painter does not want you to borrow his eyes like the European painter. He is very much different in his thought process, in his artistic sense of perception in comparison with the European painter. So the Chinese painter won't allow you, or rather does not want you to borrow his eyes. He actually wants you to enter his mind. This is very important. He doesn't want you to borrow his eyes. He wants you to enter his mind, so that on when you will undertake a journey, it will be spiritual, it will be mental, and you will enter into the psyche of the Chinese painter. That means you will appreciate the painting from the perspective of the Chinese painter, and obviously it will be an exercise to enter his mind. He will allow you to enter his mind. Then only you can appreciate the painting wholeheartedly. The landscape is an inner one, a spiritual and conceptual one. So the landscape ultimately can be termed as an inner one, because ultimately you have to enter the mind of the Chinese painter to appreciate the Chinese painting. A spiritual, or rather to say a conceptual one. So dear students, now I am proceeding to the next paragraph, page number 36. Now this is very important, the concept of Sanchui. Now what does Sanchui actually means? See, this concept is expressed as Sanchui, and Sanchui actually means mountain water. The term Sanchui actually means mountain water, which is used together to represent the word landscape. So landscape equals to mountain water. More than two elements of an image, these represent two complementary poles reflecting the Taoist view of the universe. Ultimately, this landscape of this mountain water, it represents the Taoism or the Taoist view or the Taoist theory or the Taoist concept of the universe. The mountain is young, reaching vertically towards heaven, stable, warm and dry in the sun, while the water is in horizontal, whereas the yang is vertical, in is horizontal, and it rests on the earth. It is fluid, moist and cool. And remember one thing, yang is masculine, in is feminine. I repeat, look at their contrasting natures also and their contrasting characteristics also. Whereas the yang, it reaches vertically towards heaven, it is stable, it is warm and it is dry in the sun. Whereas the water is in, mountain is yang. And look at their contrasting characteristics as I told earlier, see. Whereas the yang, it is stable, warm and dry in the sun. And in, it is horizontal. Whereas the yang, it is vertical. In is horizontal and it rests on the earth, fluid, moist and cool. The interaction means the meeting, the final meeting, the interaction of in, that is the receptive feminine aspect of universal energy. I told already that yang is masculine, in, Y-I-N, in is feminine. So the interaction of in, the receptive feminine aspect of universal energy, and its counterpart yang, active and masculine, as I told earlier, is of course a fundamental notion of Taoism, and this concept of Taoism came from Wu Daozi. So there is an interaction between the masculine and the receptive feminine aspect, that is yang and in. And this is the ultimate fundamental ideology or the ultimate fundamental notion or norm related with Taoism. What is often overlooked is an essential third element. But remember one thing, there is a third element also that helps in the interaction between the yang and the yin. So we refer to that third element as the middle void, where their interaction takes place. This can be compared with the yogic practice of pranayam. And what is the mechanism of pranayam? Breathe in, retain and breathe out. This is the concept of pranayam. Breathe in, retain and breathe out. The suspension of breath is the void. Void actually means the emptiness, the void part. So the suspension of breath is referred as the void region, where actually the meditation occurs. So breathe in, retain and breathe out. That is the mechanism or the process that is related with pranayam. And the suspension of breath, it is actually the void region. And here in this region, meditation occurs. The middle void is very important, very essential or very crucial. Nothing can happen without it. That means no interaction between yang and yin is possible without the middle void. So the middle void is very, very important. And it is equated with the yogic practice of pranayam, as already been stated here. Nothing can happen without it. Hence the importance of the white unpainted space in Chinese landscape. That is the part that we refer as the middle void. That is the part we refer as the middle void, which is essential. Nothing can happen without it. So in a Chinese landscape painting, the white unpainted part that is left without any projection of any brush or ink, the white part, that is actually the middle void. That is referred as the unpainted space in a Chinese landscape. A viewer should actually identify that. Then only the entire concept of a Chinese landscape from the perspective of a Chinese painter who had painted it will be crystal clear to the viewer. Now I am moving on to the next paragraph. See, it is written, this is also where man finds a fundamental role. There is a very important role of a man, of a human being. What is that role? In that space between heaven and earth, he becomes the conduit of communication, the medium of communication, the cord of communication, what we call conduit. Check out the spelling, dear students. C-O-N-D-U-I-T, cord. Conduit means cord of communication or medium of communication between both the poles of the universe. So ultimately it is the human being who acts as the middle void. Now if we consider the entire mechanism from the point of view of the earth and the universe, or heaven and earth, it is the human beings who actually plays the role of the cord of communication or conduit of communication between both the poles of the universe. And which are the two poles? Heaven and earth. And it is we human beings, we play the decisive role of being the cord of communication between heaven and earth, or in other words, the conduit of communication between heaven and earth. His presence is essential. His presence is very important. His presence is essential, even if it's only suggested. So presence of a human being is essential. If it is slightly been suggested, even then also the presence of a human being is essential or very important. Far from being lost or oppressed by the lofty peaks, he is, in Francois Chieng's wonderful expression. Now Francois Chieng is an art critic. So according to him, human beings are the eye of the landscape. So no matter it seems to be a bit slightly insignificant, but from the perspective of heaven and earth, the human beings act at the medium or the conduit or the cord of communication, and that according to Francis Chiong is who gives a wonderful expression, that is actually known as this mechanism of human beings acting as the conduit of communication between heaven and earth, that signifies or that justifies his particular terminology that he had told, that is the eye of the landscape. So dear students, I explained up to the eye of the landscape. Please listen to this particular audio presentation, and if there is any doubt anywhere, kindly let me know. Thank you, students. Thank you all.